This is my fourth video on for loops, and this one can be a little confusing, but we're going to put for loops inside of other for loops. And some people, well, especially beginning programmers, would wonder, why on earth would you ever want to do this? This is like a math teacher torturing me. Well, I'll tell you right now, it is actually a very crucial concept, especially when it comes to getting into a little bit more advanced programming. When you deal with arrays, and if you don't know anything about arrays, that's okay. But just think of it as just trust me. I guess I should say is this does become very, very important. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to make this somewhat basic using some simple variables. We'll go A is 1, B is 2, and C is 3, just so that we can deal with some easy numbers to work with and track what's going on. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a for loop, and I need my counter, so int I equals 1. I'm going to start at 1. And for now, I'm just going to run this a specific number of times, so I is less than or equal to C. Remember, C is 3, and I plus plus. Okay, so I have this for loop set up all ready to go, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another variable, another integer variable called answer, because I'm going to pull some mathematics in here just to track what a for loop is doing and what for loops are doing inside for loops. And so this loop is going to run, so notice that C is 3, and as long as I is less than or equal to 3. So this is really like me just putting a 3 here, and I'll just put that there just to make this simple to begin with. And so this is going to run, if you recall, 3 minus 1 is 2, and I have an equal sign on it, so I need to add 1 back. This is going to run 3 times. And so this for loop is going to run 3 times. But inside that for loop, I'm going to do another for loop. It's crucial to know that my counter, the I, has been defined, and therefore I can't call this counter I because I am inside, I'm now local, I'm inside the other for loop where I exists. So I'm going to use another called J. A lot of times I and J are the letters that get used for these counters. And I'm going to go J is less than or equal to 2. Again, try to keep this not too massive. And we're going to increment J. And this for loop is now all set up. So I have a for loop inside of a for loop, and this gets to be pretty tricky, especially as problems get more complex. And I've created a problem that's about as basic as I can make it here. And so we have to keep in mind that this for loop is going to run 3 times, but the first time that it runs this for loop. And this for loop is going to run 2 times. And so here's what I'm going to look at here. I'm going to take the answer, okay, and then I am going to just simply add b, what b is, and b is 2. Okay, just recall that b equals 2 here, just so we don't lose track of what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to walk through this and keep track of what's going on. So I is 1. And J is 1. Okay, so I is less than or equal to 3, it's going to operate. And J is less than or equal to 2, so it's going to operate. And so we take our answer 0 and we add 2 to it. Alright, so what we need to track here is make my little chart over here again. And I'm going to track each of these variables, I and J and answer, if you will. Those are really the 3 things that are going to change in my problem here. And so as I kick off this problem and begin, I is 1, and I'm going to tab these over so there's just a little more space. I is 1, J is 1, and answer is currently 0, but I'm gonna switch this here. So I is 1, this is good. J is 1, this is good, and now the answer changes to 2 because we add 2 to it. Okay, now it's important to understand that this loop just operated 1 time. We are in here, we are right at this stage right now. Well, the J gets incremented to 2, and we have to run this loop a second time. So this loop gets run a second time, and so J becomes 2. Now remember, I has not changed. Up here, this for loop is still in its first loop. So j becomes 2, and we add 2 to our answer again. So in my chart, where I'm kind of tracking what's happening, okay, I is still 1, j becomes 2, and the answer now is 4. Okay, let me start at the very beginning in case you're having a hard time understanding. Okay, I set some some variables here, and honestly, I didn't use B or C, so I'm sorry, I didn't use A or C. So we have this answer variable we set to 0, and we start this for loop. This for loop is going to run 3 times. The first time that it runs, we get to this for loop. And this for loop needs to run 2 times. Make sure you understand that. This for loop will run 2 times before we head back to the top up here. And so I is 1, j is 1, answer is now 2. This loop runs again. Answer is now, well, j is 2, and the answer is now 4. We do it to check. J is now 3. This doesn't work. This doesn't run. We jump back up to the top here, and now I is 2. I is 2. J is set to 1. Okay, that's very important. J gets reset to 1. So we have I is now 2. J is returned back to 1, and we add another 2. We add this B value here. Okay, and then now I is still 2, because now we're trapped in this for loop over here again twice, and j goes 2, and the answer is now 8. Okay, now we jump back up to the original for loop. I is 3. I is 3 will run. Okay, j returns to 1, because we're doing this for loop from the beginning again. J is 1. The answer should become 10. We go back to this for loop. J is now 2. J will become 2 here. And I'm sorry, I is still 3, my fault. J becomes 2, and the answer should be 12. Now, that means that this for loop has run 3 times, and inside each for loop, this loop has run 2 times. So you can kind of see that in my chart pattern. Here's my 2 j's, the first loop. Here's my 2 j's, the second loop. Here's my 2 j's on the third loop. And so when at the very end, outside, at the very end here, in my code, what I'd like to do is I would like to add an output that's going to simply print out the answer so I can verify that I've done this correctly. And again, remember, answer needs to be declared globally, not inside the for loop, so that it can be accessed globally outside the for loop. And I'll run this, and we'll see that our answer here is 12. And so for loops inside for loops are very tricky, but you need to be able to track them. Chart drawing can be helpful in tracking them so that you don't make mistakes.